The chandeliers dripped golden light across the Cole Mansion's ballroom, every crystal facet catching fire as if the ceiling itself had been set ablaze. Beneath their glow, champagne flutes chimed in polished hands, and laughter, sharp, measured, never too loud, moved like a current through the sea of sequined gowns and tailored tuxedos. The air smelled of money, expensive cologne layered over polished mahogany, floral arrangements imported from somewhere tropical, the faintest trace of caviar brine. It was a stage, and every guest understood their role in this performance of opulence. At the center of it all stood Zara Brooks, 28 years old, wrapped in an ivory silk gown that shimmered with every step. She looked like she belonged in this world. That was the illusion Ethan had perfected. She was not simply his wife. She was an accessory, the final stroke in his carefully curated portrait of success. To the untrained eye, she appeared flawless, skin glowing under layers of makeup applied by someone who had never once asked what she preferred, hair pressed into submission until not a single curl dared to rise in rebellion. But behind the polite smile that curved her lips, a storm rattled the cage of her ribcage. She had not touched a paintbrush in years. The woman who once splattered canvases with color and chaos had been reduced to a mute ornament. Ethan Cole, her husband, moved through the crowd with the assurance of a man who had never once lost anything worth keeping. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a suit that whispered wealth without needing to shout, he greeted investors and power players with the same expression he reserved for boardrooms, attentive but detached. His hand rested absently on Zara's lower back, a gesture that looked affectionate to onlookers but felt more like a leash to her. She caught his reflection in a gilded mirror across the room, polished, confident, untouchable, and beside him her own reflection looked foreign, a woman reduced to symmetry and silence. Still, something in her was shifting tonight. It was subtle, like the first tremor before an earthquake. Maybe it was the 3 glasses of wine she had already consumed, one more than Ethan's quiet approval usually allowed. Maybe it was the envelope tucked deep in her clutch, paper that carried the weight of a future she hadn't dared to believe in. Or maybe it was the creeping awareness that 28 years was too long to spend disappearing. Whatever the cause, the smile she wore tonight felt looser, less obedient, like a mask she might finally be ready to drop. Then Olivia Grant arrived. The crowd bent toward her presence the way flowers turn toward the sun, though hers was a colder light. She descended the staircase in a scarlet dress that clung to her like a secret weapon, her every step deliberate, designed to draw blood without leaving a visible wound. Olivia, Ethan's ex-fiancée, the woman whose name still lingered in whispered conversations, whose shadow stretched long over Zara's marriage. Her perfume wafted ahead of her, a rich, predatory sweetness that seemed to alter the very air. She smiled, the kind of smile that suggested the entire room was her audience, and Zara was the punchline. Zara's spine stiffened, her fingers tightened on the stem of her glass, knuckles blanching as Olivia glided closer, lips curved in a mockery of warmth. Ethan noticed too late, his hand still occupied with the handshake of a potential investor. Olivia's eyes flicked to Zara, then to him, lingering just long enough to remind everyone that once, not too long ago, she had been his chosen future. "Happy birthday, darling," Olivia purred when she reached Zara, leaning in with a kiss that never touched her cheek. Her voice carried the edge of polished sea, teal. 28 already. I remember when Ethan and I were your age, we thought we could conquer the world. Her gaze shifted to Ethan again, that red dress shimmering like danger itself. Zara forced her lips into a polite smile, but the storm inside her chest was no longer quiet. Something about tonight, about Olivia's poisonous arrival, about the diamond necklace Ethan had clasped around her throat as though fastening a collar, about the unspoken rule that she remain flawless and voiceless, ignited a crack in the carefully painted canvas of her life. She felt it widening with every word Olivia spoke, with every second Ethan ignored her to charm someone else. And for the first time in years, Zara allowed herself to wonder not what Ethan would approve of, not what society expected of her, but what might happen if she stopped pretending entirely. Tonight, something was different. The air hummed with it. Somewhere deep inside, she felt a laugh stirring, a laugh that didn't belong in this room of polished perfection, a laugh that could shatter the chandeliers if she let it out. She raised her glass, her smile still polite but her eyes sharper now, watching Olivia glide closer and Ethan stand distracted, oblivious to the storm building right beside him. The mansion sparkled, but Zara's silence was cracking, and she knew with a clarity that felt electric, tonight, something was going to break. The hum of the ballroom shifted when Olivia's voice rose above the swell of conversation. It was effortless, the way she commanded attention, as if every chandelier had dimmed just to let her shine brighter. She lifted her glass high, the scarlet silk of her dress catching the golden light, and with a smile sharp enough to cut glass, she said, "Let us toast to the birthday girl." Every head turned at once. Conversations cut short mid-sentence. Even the string quartet in the corner faltered, bows hovering just above their instruments as though they too had been summoned into stillness. Zara felt Ethan's hand press harder into her waist, the subtle tightening of a man who wanted control without drawing notice. She could feel the warning in the weight of his palm, silent but unmistakable. Be quiet, be graceful, be mine. That was what his touch always said. But as Olivia's eyes glittered with cruel amusement, Zara felt something else rise in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. Olivia's words dripped with poison disguised as charm. 28. My, how time flies. I remember when Ethan and I were your age. We thought we could conquer the world together. Her laughter floated above the guests like perfume, intoxicating, suffocating. Zara's stomach knotted, but her hand slipped into her clutch almost of its own accord, brushing against the sealed envelope hidden there. Her pulse quickened. The crowd leaned closer, waiting for her to smile, to nod, to endure yet another performance of someone else's script. But instead, Zara heard her own voice, steadier than she expected, carrying clearly through the silence. Before we toast, I have an announcement. The words sliced through the room like lightning. Glasses paused midway to lips. A murmur rippled through the gathering as if the guests had just realized they were about to witness something unscripted, something real. Ethan's fingers dug harder into her side, his posture stiffening as though bracing for impact. Zara drew out the envelope, its crisp edges glowing white under the chandelier light, and the sound of its flap tearing open was louder than the violins had been. I've been accepted, she said, her voice gathering strength with each syllable. To the Paris art residency, 6 months. I leave next month. The silence that followed was absolute. A silence thick enough to hear hearts pounding. A silence that burned with disbelief, curiosity, judgment. Olivia's smile stretched wider, delighted by the chaos she had not started, but would happily watch consume the room. Ethan's face, drained of color, the perfect facade of composure cracking. You applied without telling me, he said, his voice low, dangerous, the voice he used before hostile takeovers, before crushing competitors. Zara's lips curved into a faint smile that was not polite, not obedient, but alive. I applied 2 years ago, before you called my art a hobby, before you turned my studio into your gym, before I forgot I was Zara and became only Mrs. Cole. The crowd gasped, some with shock, others with something closer to awe. For the first time in 5 years, Zara was not an ornament in Ethan Cole's perfect picture. She was color bleeding outside the lines, refusing to be contained. The air itself seemed to tremble. The champagne glasses in guests' hands shook as though even the crystal understood a fracture had opened, one that could not be repaired. Ethan's eyes darkened, his hand slipping from her waist. Olivia's delighted laugh rang out, slicing through the tension. Can't control your wife, Ethan. How unlike you. The ballroom held its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Zara's heart pounded, not with fear, but with a strange exhilaration. Tonight the cage door was open, and she had just stepped into the unknown. Ethan's silence was more terrifying than if he had shouted. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing, his hand no longer resting on Zara's waist, but hanging uselessly at his side as though he did not know what to do with it. The ballroom waited, A sea of frozen faces turned toward the couple who had just stopped pretending their marriage was perfect. Zara felt the heat of dozens of stares press against her skin, some wide with horror, others hungry for drama, all of them recording this moment in their memories, and a few even on their phones. She held the letter aloft like evidence at a trial. "This is my future," she declared. "Not the one chosen for me, not the one arranged by anyone else, but the one I claimed for myself. Paris. Painting. Living again." Olivia's laugh, delicate and cruel, rang out from across the room. "I warned you, Ethan," she said, her voice gleaming with venom. The Ethan I knew never let anything slip through his fingers. The words sliced through the tension like a blade dipped in honey. Zara saw it then, the exact moment the mask of control shattered on Ethan's face. He had never been publicly humiliated before, never been cornered in front of his investors, his brother, his rivals, by the very woman who was supposed to complete his portrait of success. His father's ghost seemed to loom behind his eyes, that same ruthless coal blood boiling to the surface. His hand lifted, slow, inevitable, and then cracked across Zara's cheek with a sound that split the night open. The slap was not vicious, but it was deliberate. It was possession, dismissal, correction. The sound echoed against marble floors and crystal glassware, louder than the music, louder than the collective gasp that followed. A few guests actually stepped back as though violence might spread like fire. Olivia's lips curved into a satisfied smirk, savoring the spectacle. Zara stood very still, the sting blooming across her face. For one heartbeat she stared at Ethan, her husband, the man she had once loved enough to abandon her own dreams for, and she saw not a partner, but an owner. Around her, the ballroom spun in a blur of silks and diamonds, whispers racing like wildfire, but inside her chest something unexpected cracked open. It began as a tremor, a small vibration rising from deep in her stomach, sliding past her throat before she could suppress it. Then it burst free. A laugh. Soft at first, then rolling louder, gathering strength like a wave crashing against the shore. It was not bitter, it was not broken. It was the laugh of revelation, of liberation, of a woman realizing the bars of her cage had never been locked. Every guest froze, unsettled by the sound. Ethan's hand, still tingling from the strike, hovered in the air as if he had forgotten how it got there. Zara's laugh filled every corner of the room, a melody no orchestra could play, rich and terrifying in its freedom. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice ringing as clear as a bell. "Thank you for showing me the truth in front of them all." She touched her cheek, still smiling, still laughing under her breath, and the crowd saw something shift in her eyes. She was no longer the silent, perfect wife. She was fire, she was color, she was alive. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole realized he had not just lost control of the room. He had lost Zara. The air pulsed with suspense as she stepped forward, her laughter still carrying, and the whole room knew they were witnessing the beginning of an ending no one could stop. The echo of Zara's laughter lingered in the chandeliers, long after she had vanished through the grand doors of the mansion. Guests shifted uncomfortably, sipping champagne they no longer tasted, whispering in tight circles, as though gossip could shield them from the truth they had just witnessed. Ethan Cole stood at the center of it all, frozen like a statue, his palm still burning from the slap that had ended his marriage in front of half the city's elite. The perfect host had been stripped bare, and what remained was a man exposed, trembling beneath the weight of his own cruelty. By morning, the world had already taken the story from the ballroom and carried it like wildfire. Someone's phone had caught everything, the announcement, the defiance, the slap, the laughter that followed. The video spread across social media before dawn, and by the time Ethan opened his eyes in the cavernous emptiness of his California king bed, millions had seen his wife rise from the ashes of his control. Hashtags surged. The laugh that saved her, the slap that ruined him. A movement had begun, and he was its unwilling villain. The mansion itself seemed haunted in the aftermath. Chandeliers glittered without warmth, halls echoed with absence, and the scent of expensive roses clung stubbornly to the air. a reminder of the party that had destroyed Emma. Ethan wandered from room to room like a man searching for a ghost, but every corner mocked him. Her studio had been gutted long ago, replaced with his machines and weights. But in the corner, where paint had once splattered like sparks of life, a streak of cerulean still clung to the wall. He touched it with trembling fingers, as though it might burn him. On his desk lay a leather-bound journal. Her handwriting curled across the first page like vines. She had left it behind not as reconciliation, but as proof. Ethan opened it with the caution of a man handling explosives, and each word detonated in his chest. Year 1, I laughed too loudly. He says I should soften my voice. Year 3, he calls my art a hobby. I paint at night so I don't disturb him. Year 5, I cannot remember the last time I created just for me. The entries bled together like bruises, every page a record of her slow erasure, until the final note written the morning of her birthday. Paris wants me. Tonight I will tell him. Either he sees me, or he shows me who he truly is. Either way, I will be free. Ethan slammed the book shut, his reflection in the glass wall across from him fractured, unrecognizable. He had built empires by acquiring, by controlling, by bending the world into the shape he desired. But here, in the ruins of his marriage, control was ash, power was mockery, and acquisition was hollow. His phone lit up with frantic messages from investors and board members, all warning him about the video, about the fallout, about optics. Olivia's message was the sharpest of all, a champagne emoji and a single line. She beat you. The house groaned around him, marble and glass offering no comfort, no absolution. Outside, reporters gathered at the gates, cameras hungry for his downfall. Inside, silence pressed against his ribs until it felt like suffocation, and through it all, he could hear it. The so-und of Zara's laugh, replaying not on his phone but in his mind, relentless, merciless, beautiful. A laugh that had ended everything for him, but begun everything for her. He sat at the edge of the bed, the journal beside him, his hand still aching from the strike that had shattered his own reflection. For the first time in years, Ethan Cole had no plan, no strategy, no script. Only the weight of what he had lost, and the knowledge that the world had seen him become his father's son in the most public way possible. And as the sun climbed higher over the city, casting gold into the empty mansion, Ethan realized he was no longer the master of the story. Zara was, and she had already walked out of his cage laughing, leaving him to rot in the silence of his own making. The sun was barely rising when Zara opened her eyes in Laya's tiny Harlem apartment. The ceiling was cracked, the radiator clanged like a restless drum, and the smell of strong coffee drifted in from the kitchen. It was imperfect, loud, alive, so unlike the pristine mansion she had fled. She sat up slowly, her face still faintly tender from the slap, but when her fingers brushed the mark, she did not wince. Instead, she smiled. It was proof that she had chosen herself, proof that the cage door was not just open, but shattered. Laya burst into the room wearing paint-stained overalls, her eyes glowing with pride. "The whole city saw you," she said. "Your laugh is everywhere." Zara reached for her phone. Notifications lit up the screen like fireworks. Videos of her birthday speech had gone viral overnight, reshared across continents. Strangers she had never met were calling her brave, iconic, a phoenix rising from ashes. Her old artwork, forgotten in storage, was suddenly being circulated online. Someone had captioned one of her abstract pieces with the words, "She laughed herself free." Tens of thousands of people had liked it, thousands more commenting with their own stories of breaking free. Zara's hands trembled, not with fear but with energy. For years she had been invisible. Her art dismissed, her voice silenced. Now the world was listening. She pushed herself off the couch, moving instinctively toward the corner of the living room where Laya had set up an easel for her. A blank canvas waited like an old friend. Zara gripped the brush, the weight of it foreign after so many years, but familiar too, like a heartbeat she had forgotten how to hear. The first stroke was jagged, messy, but it was hers. Color bloomed across white space, raw and unfiltered. She painted a silhouette dissolving into laughter, each laugh bursting free as a bird, wings stretched wide. "Day 1, she whispered, naming the piece aloud. The start of everything. By mid-morning, Zara walked through Harlem's streets with Laya. The air smelled of bakeries and bus exhaust, alive with children running and vendors shouting. People glanced at her twice, recognizing her from the video. Some smiled, some whispered, but no one looked at her like she was a trophy on display. She was a person again, whole, untamed. Then came the call from Elise Morgan, owner of the Morgan Gallery, one of the most respected names in New York's art scene. "Zara, I saw the video," Elise said, her voice electric with urgency. "The laugh is art in itself. I want to put your work on display, a solo exhibition, 3 weeks from now." Zara froze in the middle of the sidewalk. A solo exhibition. The dream Ethan had dismissed as childish. The dream she had buried under layers of compromise. The dream was now knocking at her door louder than ever before. "Do you have enough pieces?" Elise asked. "Enough to tell your story?" Zara's eyes swept the street, the murals on brick walls, the children's chalk drawings on pavement, the graffiti screaming life across abandoned buildings. Inspiration was everywhere. "I will," she said with steady conviction. But just as the light inside her swelled, her phone buzzed with a "You message," a number she knew by heart. "Ethan, please come home. We can discuss this rationally." She stared at the words, the arrogance of them, as if her freedom were a negotiation, as if her soul were a contract to be signed. With one swipe she deleted the message, a small rebellion, yet powerful enough to make her breath catch. Leia grinned beside her. "That's the sound of chains breaking," she said. That night Zara painted again until her hands cramped, each stroke a confession, each canvas a rebirth. Her laughter had started the revolution, but the brush would finish it. The city outside pulsed with noise, but within her small borrowed space, Zara Brooks was louder still, and for the first time in years, the noise belonged to her. Rain-slicked streets mirrored the city's chaos as Zara stepped into the law offices of Williams and Associates. The building breathed money, with its polished marble floors and mahogany walls, but Zara was not the same woman who used to flinch under chandeliers and whispered judgment. She walked in wearing yellow, bold and unapologetic, her natural curls a halo of defiance. Every eye followed her, not because she was Ethan Cole's wife, but because she was Zara Brooks, the woman whose laugh had become a battle cry. Inside the conference room, Ethan was already seated. He rose when she entered, reflex drilled into him by a mother who had once taught him manners but not how to love. His suit was sharp, his tie perfect, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. He looked at her hair, her clothes, her unshaken posture, as though cataloging evidence of the woman he no longer controlled. He gestured to the chair across from him. She sat without waiting, a tiny rebellion that filled the room with power. The lawyers began their ritual, papers shuffled, terms were read, assets were listed like items at an auction. Ethan's attorney spoke first, his voice smooth and arrogant. "My client is prepared to be generous. A settlement of $2 million, Theo's, a Mercedes, a Manhattan property." Zara raised her hand and cut him off mid-sentence. "I don't want his money, I don't want his cars, I don't want his property." The room went still. Ethan leaned forward, confusion flickering in his gray eyes. "What do you want then?" Zara slid her own folder across the table. "My paintings. Every one of them. The ones in storage. The ones you bought before we married. The ones I created in secret at 3 in the morning while you slept. I want my grandmother's piano from the attic. And I want my freedom. Nothing else." Ethan's composure cracked. "That's ridiculous. You're entitled to more than half." Zara locked eyes with him, and for the first time in years he flinched under her gaze. "You never understood," she said softly but firmly. "I was never for sale. I was never yours to buy or display. You don't get to decide my worth anymore." A nervous cough came from Ethan's lawyer. "Miss Brooks, perhaps we should discuss this rationally." Zara laughed once, sharp and cutting, a sound that sent a chill across the table. "Rationally? That's the word he used when he asked me to erase myself, rationally, as if passion, art, and freedom are errors in a spreadsheet. Ethan tried again, softer this time. I loved you. No. Zara's reply was immediate, final. You loved the idea of me, the proof of diversity, the accessory who made you look progressive, the artist whose dreams you could afford to indulge as long as they stayed small. But me, the real me, the woman who painted colors too wild for your walls, you never loved her. You never even saw her. Silence weighed heavy. Outside, thunder cracked against the city sky. Zara stood, sliding the folder back to her side. Sign it, she said, her voice like steel. Sign it, and I walk away clean. Fight me, and the video will look like a love letter compared to what I'll unleash next. Ethan looked down at the papers, his jaw tight, his pride unraveling. He was a man who had won every acquisition he touched, yet here he sat defeated before a woman who had finally chosen herself. His hand trembled as he reached for the pen, the finality of the moment pressing down on him. Zara picked up her bag, her head high, her voice steady. I'm not disappearing anymore. I am becoming. And you will have to live with the echo of my laugh reminding you every day what you lost. She walked out, her heels striking the marble like a drumbeat of freedom, leaving Ethan in the ruins of his empire and his silence, while the storm outside broke open and the city roared with life. The July heat pressed against the city like a weight when Margaret Cole stepped off the plane at JFK. She traveled light, only a single suitcase, but the air around her carried decades of stories untold. At 63, she had learned to walk with the quiet dignity of a survivor. Her silver hair framed a face lined not just with age, but with choices. Choices to endure, choices to leave, choices to live again. She had not warned Ethan of her arrival. She had not told Lucas either. The only person who knew was Zara because Margaret had reached out to her first. It had been a sleepless night in Rome when Margaret had seen the video. Ethan's hand rising, Zara's laugh breaking free. It had struck her like lightning because she had seen that scene before. She had lived it, except her laugh had never come. Hers had been silence, concealer, apologies. Years wasted waiting for a man to change. She had sent Zara a message not for Ethan's sake, but for her own. For the sisterhood of women who had endured coal men and survived to tell it. When Zara opened the door of her small Bedford-Stuyvesant studio, she was in paint-splattered jeans, her curls wild, her skin glowing with the sweat of creation. Margaret looked at her and saw both a daughter and a mirror of the woman she once wished to be. You are taller than I expected, Margaret said, then laughed softly. But of course you are. You stand straight. I imagine you weren't allowed to before. They sat on the floor together because Zara had only one chair, and it was already occupied by a half-finished canvas. Margaret pulled out a bottle of Italian wine from her suitcase. The good kind, she said, the kind that makes truth easier to swallow. As they poured into mismatched mugs, the air between them grew thick with shared recognition. I saw the video, Margaret began. I saw my son hit you. I saw you laugh. And I thought of myself 30 years ago when his father struck me across the cheek at a dinner party. I should have laughed then too, but I didn't. I stayed for 15 years. I gave him 2 sons, thinking motherhood might soften him. It didn't. It only made me smaller. You left in 5. You laughed your way free. That's the difference between us. Zara's throat tightened. She wanted to say she wasn't brave, that she had waited too long herself. But Margaret's eyes, pale and piercing, silenced excuses. Instead, Zara asked, when did you finally know it was time? The day Ethan turned 13, Margaret said. His father told him women were like businesses. You had to manage them properly or they'd run wild, and Ethan nodded. That's when I knew if I stayed, I would lose him too. Zara felt the words strike like a blade. Ethan's cruelty had not begun with her. It had roots. Generations of men who measured worth in ownership, who broke what they could not understand. Margaret's hand found Zara's, firm and unshaking. Do not let him turn your laugh into his redemption. Men like Ethan will always try to use a woman's freedom as proof of their change. But your story is not his. It never was. They walked through the studio, Margaret pausing before a new painting, a woman's silhouette filled with countless smaller silhouettes, each moving in different directions, but somehow all forward. "This is us," Margaret said quietly, "all of us who learned to walk away." When she left, she carried the painting with her, a gift from Zara. They hugged fiercely, both women knowing the bond between them was not blood, but survival. Later that night, Zara's phone buzzed. Ethan's message was short. "My mother is in New York. Did she contact you?" Zara typed back one word. "Yes." 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then reappeared. No message followed. In the silence that stretched between them, Zara felt the truth solidify. Margaret's visit was never about Ethan. It was about the inheritance of strength. The reminder that breaking free was not just a moment in a ballroom, but a legacy passed from one survivor to another. The Riverside Community Center pulsed with life on a sweltering August evening. The air conditioning wheezed, the fans spun lazily, but the heat inside was made bearable by the sound of music pouring through thin walls. Zara was finishing her Wednesday art class, helping adults who had long forgotten they were creative rediscover color on canvas. Laughter echoed as students left with paint on their hands, some shyly proud of their crooked flowers or clumsy sunsets. She was wiping her brushes when the salsa beat next door grew louder, spilling into her studio, like a call she could not ignore. The door burst open and Carmen Vega, the dance instructor, strode in wearing a red dress that moved like fire. "Zara, mi amor, I need you," she declared dramatically. "My assistant twisted his ankle, and I cannot teach a full class alone. You must help me." Zara laughed, shaking her head. "Carmen, I paint, I don't dance." "Nonsense. Everyone dances," Carmen replied, already pulling her into the other room. The dance studio was lined with mirrors, walls vibrating with rhythm. Students stood awkwardly in pairs, some shuffling nervously, others giggling at their own stiffness. Divorcees, young professionals, couples looking for spice, all beginners. Carmen clapped her hands. "Salsa is not steps. Salsa is conversation. Trust me, by the end you will not think, you will only feel." Zara was guiding a nervous, middle-aged woman through the basic step when Carmen's sharp voice rang out. "You, in the corner hiding like a shadow. Yes, you. Come forward. You will dance with Zara." Zara turned, her heart stopping in her chest. Standing there in khakis and a damp Columbia University t-shirt was Ethan. He looked utterly out of place, sweat beading at his temple, his usually controlled posture faltering under Carmen's command. Their eyes met in the mirror, the same distance they had once shared in a marriage that felt both distant and suffocating. He began to speak, probably to explain or apologize, but Carmen cut him off. "No words. Salsa is better than words. Bodies tell truth." Zara's pulse raced as Ethan stepped toward her. He extended his hand, uncertain, not commanding. She hesitated only a breath before placing her hand in his. His grip was different, not the ownership she remembered. Tentative, asking. They began the basic steps. His lead was stiff, too forceful, and she resisted instinctively, their rhythm clashing. He stumbled. She rolled her eyes. Carmen shouted instructions in Spanish and clapped to the beat, forcing them to keep going. Slowly, almost unwillingly, something shifted. Ethan loosened, adjusting his hold. Zara stopped anticipating his mistakes and started responding. For the first time in years, they moved together not as combatants or as husband and wife, but as two people learning to listen with their bodies. "You're different," Ethan said under his breath as he spun her gently. "So are you," Zara replied, noticing the calluses on his fingers. They were not from business, they were from paintbrushes. The class went on. Partners switched. Laughter bubbled through the room. When they found each other again near the end, Ethan was laughing too, an unpolished, unguarded sound she had never heard from him before. It startled her, cracking something in her chest that she refused to name. When the music ended, students clapped for themselves, relieved they had survived. Zara pulled her hand free quickly, but Ethan's voice caught her. "Can I tell you something?" She turned, wary but curious. "That laugh you gave at the party," he said, his voice low and rough. "I hear it every day. but not like a punishment anymore. More like an alarm, like it keeps telling me to wake up. Zara said nothing. Her silence was not rejection, but not invitation either. It was acknowledgement, and that was enough. That night in her studio, she painted two figures dancing on opposite sides of the canvas, not touching, each with invisible partners, but moving to the same music. She titled it Parallel Movement. When she posted it, a comment appeared from Ethan's account, same song, different dance. She did not reply. She did not delete it either. Some truths lived best in the space, best between words, carried instead in rhythm and unfinished steps. The rain had not stopped all day, as if the city itself sensed something monumental was about to break. Zara stood in front of the Morgan Gallery, her farewell exhibition only minutes from opening. Inside, the walls carried her soul in paint. Every wound, every laugh, every resurrection laid bare in strokes of color that burned brighter than chandeliers ever had in the Cole mansion. Tonight was not about Ethan. It was not about revenge. It was about her. And yet, in the corner of her mind, she knew his world was crumbling at the very same hour. Across town, Ethan sat in his bare Brooklyn apartment, staring at the text from his brother. Olivia has the votes. Emergency board meeting at 7. If you don't show, she takes the company. His father's empire. His grandfather's legacy. Everything the Cole name was built upon. Ethan looked at the clock. 7 p.m. The same moment Zara would stand in the gallery and claim her truth. The choice cut into him like glass. Lucas's call came minutes later. If you let her win, Ethan, you're no better than Dad. This company is ours. It is survival. Ethan's reply was steady, almost too calm. Maybe survival isn't the point anymore. Maybe letting it die is. He hung up before Lucas could answer, put on the only simple suit he owned, and walked into the storm. The gallery buzzed with anticipation. Collectors, reporters, students, women who had traveled across states just to see the woman whose laugh had gone viral. Zara moved through the crowd like light through water, wearing gold that shimmered like fire at sunset. Her hair was crowned in braids, her smile small but unshakable. She felt power in her veins, a kind of power that was hers alone. When she caught sight of Ethan standing quietly at the back, drenched from the rain, but rooted like a man who had finally stopped running, her heart skipped, not from longing, but from recognition. He had chosen this room over the boardroom. Elise, the gallery owner, tapped her glass. "Ladies and gentlemen, our artist would like to say a few words." Zara stepped forward, and the hum of voices fell to silence. 6 months ago, I laughed my way out of a marriage, not because it was funny, but because I finally understood the joke. For years, I painted myself small to fit someone else's frame. Tonight, these walls show what happens when you choose your own canvas. Applause rippled, but it was her next move that stunned the room. At the far end of the gallery stood a covered canvas. With steady hands, she unveiled it. The painting was raw, brutal, beautiful. Two figures stood on opposite sides of a river of color. One dissolving into the background, muted, ghostly. The other erupting outward in radiant hues, laughing, free. The piece was titled, Forgiveness. Zara's voice trembled but did not break. Forgiveness, not for him, for me. For the girl who thought being loved meant being owned. For every moment I painted beige when I dreamed in purple. For the years I silenced my own voice. Tonight, I forgive myself. The room erupted. People cried, strangers hugged, phones lit up as flashes captured the moment. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the painting like it was both an indictment and a benediction. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Lucas again. Olivia just won. The company is gone. Ethan silenced the call, his eyes never leaving Zara. She stepped down, moving back through the crowd, and for a moment their paths crossed. Her eyes flicked to him, calm, steady. "You chose to be here," she said softly. "There was never a choice," Ethan replied. For the first time in his life, his voice carried no hunger for acquisition, no desperation for control, just truth. Outside, Thunder rolled as Olivia Grant raised her glass in a boardroom victory toast, claiming Cole Industries for herself. Inside the gallery, Zara Brooks raised her chin higher, claiming something greater, herself. The chandeliers of the Cole mansion blazed one final time, not for a wedding or a birthday, but for a funeral disguised as a gala. Olivia Grant, draped in the same red silk she had worn the night Zara's life cracked open, stood at the top of the grand staircase. Her smile was painted on, brittle and sharp, her glass raised high. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "welcome to the liquidation gala. Tonight, we celebrate the end of an empire." Her words echoed across the ballroom, where once champagne had flowed like victory. Now the air carried something sour, the stench of desperation hidden under expensive perfume. Every guest knew the truth. Olivia had clawed her way to the top, stolen the company, worn the crown with venom, and in less than a year, she had destroyed it. The empire collapsed under her greed, partners fled, and now the mansion, the art, the legacy would all be auctioned to strangers. In the crowd, Zara stood still as stone, wearing yellow like a banner of defiance. She had not come for Olivia. She had not come for the mansion. She came because some ghosts deserved to be buried properly. Laya whispered at her side, "This is madness. Who throws a party for their own ruin?" But Zara understood. Olivia wasn't celebrating. She was clinging to the illusion that she was still in control. The room fell silent when Olivia's eyes found Zara. "Ah, the birthday girl," she purred, summoning her forward like a lioness calling prey. The woman whose laugh started it all. "Come, Zara, let us give them the showdown they came for." Zara's heels clicked against marble as she climbed the stairs, every step a reminder that she was not the trembling accessory Ethan had once dressed her as. She was the storm that had broken their world open. At the top, she faced Olivia, two women bound by the same man but divided by choices. "You thought you won," Olivia said, her voice dripping with venom. "You thought leaving meant freedom, but I took everything from him, his name, his empire, his power. He has nothing now. I won." Zara's smile was calm, almost pitying. "You took ashes, Olivia. Ethan already let it go. He lives in California now, painting badly and teaching veterans to heal through art. He's happy, which means you never took anything that mattered." The crowd shifted, whispers rising like flames. Olivia's mask cracked, rage flashing in her eyes. She lifted her hand, the same gesture Ethan once made in this very ballroom. The intent was clear. But Zara caught her wrist before it could fall. "Not this time," she said, her voice sharp as glass. "You don't own this moment." Zara laughed then, not cruel, but free. A laugh that reminded every witness of the night she had broken her cage. It rolled through the ballroom, a sound that exposed the emptiness of Olivia's performance. The guests began to leave, their hunger for spectacle replaced by discomfort. No one wanted to watch Olivia unravel for real. At the foot of the stairs, Zara paused and turned, her voice carrying like a verdict. "The real revenge is not taking what someone else built. It's building something they could never imagine. And I have." Olivia crumpled on the staircase, her red dress pooling like blood around her. Alone, broken. Her party had become her execution. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. Zara stepped into the waiting car where Laya sat behind the wheel. "Airport," Zara said simply. As they drove away, she looked at the mansion one last time. Not with longing, not with pain, with closure. It was no longer her cage. It was Olivia's tomb. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Saw the news. Hope you're okay." She typed back, "More than okay. Free." A pause. 3 dots. Then his reply. "Me too." Finally. "Me too." Zara deleted the thread without hesitation. Not from anger, but because the story was finished. She had given herself the ending, not him. Hours later, as the plane lifted from the runway, Zara pressed her forehead to the window. New York glittered beneath her like a dress she had outgrown. Ahead lay Paris, Blank canvases, mornings drenched in paint, laughter that no longer needed to prove anything. The best revenge had never been revenge at all. It was simply becoming exactly who she was always meant to be.